Hey, what's up, everybody? Let me get this right. There we go. Welcome. It is Friday night. That means it is Ghost Files Live Friday. Wow, I have, bam. I was actually streaming upon myself while I was checking everything. Sorry, everybody. It's been a hectic week. It's been a hectic Friday, but it's Friday, September 27th, and we're going to have a good one tonight. We're going to talk about Ghost Jason tonight. I figured, with everything going on with the Kickstarter, it might be nice to go back to the beginning of this whole thing. And while I was looking for some files this week, I stumbled upon the old mask reference folder that we used to build the original Ghost Hawk. I know we've had a lot of people ask, over the last, 8 years, how did the Ghost Hawk come to be? How did you design it? What were the thoughts that went into it? So tonight we're going to take a little trip down Friday the 13th memory lane. We're going to take a look at all of the Jasons from all 12 films, just kind of refresh our memories about the variety of Jasons that we experienced over the years. And then we're going to dive into where the creation of my first cosplay came from, and then eventually the pieces that put together Ghost Jason, why those things were chosen, and how it ended up to how it ended up. Tonight, I'm actually wearing Horror Effects Designs. Jeremy Howard designed this for me. This was used in Never Hike Alone 2. This is actually what I wore a couple weeks ago in Colorado. This is a screen used jacket. He did a very good job on this. We'll get into what specifically this jacket is over here. We've also got a Horror Effects Design Repro final mask, and that's the actual head that was this one. Yeah, that's the one that was underwater. So this is the one that's underwater at the end of Never Hike Alone 2. Which reminds me, if you remember, first of all, subscribe, like this video, subscribe to the channel. I'll get to comments in a second. I see them pouring in, so I'm sure there's a ton of people in the chat. I saw some people filling it up before. But we have the Kickstarter for the final cut going on right now on Kickstarter. For those of you who remember, the link to that Kickstarter is below in the description of this video. Please head over there, grab yourself a Blu-ray, grab yourself a shirt, a pin, a poster, whatever you want. There's the bundles, I would say, are the best deals. For $100 right now, we probably made one of the most affordable camper packs for this round, because we're not making a movie so much, but I think what you get out of the camper pack is some of the most value that you'll get. Anyone who wants the entire Never Hike Alone collection, the Camp Collector, that's another one I would suggest. But also what I was actually getting to is that the Jason that appears at the bottom of the lake at the end of Never Hike Alone 2, the last image, which this head is from, this is actually available on the campaign. It is one of the highest tier things you can get. I believe it would be a producer perk for Ghosts in the Fog, which means you would get a missing persons poster, and then you would actually be able to, we'll ship you the entire body of Jason that you get to keep in your house, use around Halloween, all that stuff. And if we get to a successful campaign and we're ahead of the curve and you want it for this Halloween, I will send it to you this Halloween before we even close the campaign, as long as we cross our goal. So right now we're closing in on $30,000. I'd like to get pushed past that tonight. If any of you have that in you, remember you can either, if you've already made a pledge, you can actually adjust your pledge. You can add more to it, add more on. Not add more on, but add more on, which if you have any questions, you can always email me at wompstompllc@gmail.com. I'll help walk you through the process. It's one of the reasons why I went back to Kickstarter. The ability to adjust your cart for the thing is, I think, really helpful for backers as we introduce new things. I believe next week, I'm going to be looking into adding a few more elements to the campaign, which I think will be really nice. Some additional stuff, maybe bring back the beanies. I know it's getting cold out there, and these are some things we might be able to ship ahead of time. All that fun stuff. But without any further ado, before I jump into sort of my presentation here, which I apologize in advance, it has been a very busy week, and I did put this together. Some of it is pretty nice. Some of it's a little haphazard, but I hope you enjoy it. So it should be fun. But let me hop into the comments real quick. I also got to change some stuff around. So let me get my boop. There we go. Let me see, background. I think I'm happy with this background for now, or we could change it to the ocean one, or not the ocean, but the lake. Let's see, to the comments we go. Oh my God, so many people in here. Of course, Mitch was in here early. Lamontre was in here early. Jamie from, I believe from Spain, right? She's in Spain, or he's in Spain, and tuned in early, but we're streaming late tonight. Allie's here, obviously. Steve, Undead. Remember, Undead is our moderator for the chat. If you see this guy, this is the one who's helping everybody out. He'll be posting links, doing all those things. If you have questions, because obviously I'm going to be flying through a lot of information tonight. Super chats are your best friend. Oh my Lord. Look at Undead already with the $50 super chat. You can donate to the super chat the money. Thank you, Undead. That's you starting it off with a bang. That's great. Let me see who else is here. The Crawling Chaos. Hey, the Horrocks are here. What's up? Robert the Wolfman's in here. Like I said, Mitch Ripper, Cheesy Corn Pop, Jim Kelly, Steve DMV, Tyler's in the house. Eric's in the house. What's up, Eric? I'm getting you. There you go. Dr. Eggman, are these movies canon? And if they are, where were they placed in the timeline? I'm actually going to get into that tonight. These do fit into the Paramount canon. They pick up from part 8, but we're going to actually get into that discussion tonight when it comes over there. Look at this Batman versus Zilla. What is going on with my stuff tonight? Crazy. Mako Animation and Mako Animation. Hey, Mako Animation. No, Mako Animation's in the house tonight. Our good friends working on Ghost in the Fog with us, which we'll probably do an in-depth sort of look through that stuff again pretty soon when I get some more stuff. That's funny. I wanted to nick the DF, but YouTube wouldn't let me. Yeah, I understand probably why they wouldn't. All right. Everyone's in here. What do we got? Wow, we got a pretty good crowd in here for this. So let's go back many years. I think anyone who's a fan of Friday the 13th has grown up wanting to create their own Ghost Jason costume. Everything for Never Hike Alone that I did was, it started with coming up with a costume. And before I had gone out and done anything else with the Never Hike Alone brand, I built this sort of kind of interesting costume that fit mostly part 3. So going into it, I can actually do a quick screen share of it, which let's see what happens when I click this. Boop, boom. And then I do a little bit of this. There we go. So here it is. So this is 2015. This is an actual image from the first ever Never Hike Alone, the one I've never shown anybody. Now, it doesn't mean that there weren't a few good frames in the movie, but this was basically the overall costume. It was very much part 3 inspired. I had the gray pants with some blood on it, the Dickies style shirt with nothing on under it, and sort of just bare hands. Human style skin. That's a NECA part 3 mask, which actually became the first Ghost Hawk, believe it or not. And as you can see, I'm still wielding the yellow axe, which was given to me by producer Carolyn Gare. So before we sort of jump into this part, where I am here is that like this was supposed to be a fun go in the backwoods, shoot something for the hell of it, and get it done. This was the costume I put together. The hood that I have is a latex hood that I bought off of eBay that barely fit. Like it used to come up to my chin and like really press. Like it was so tiny, it would press my head. It was a part 4, maybe a part 5. Like at home, it was just not the greatest thing. It wasn't very stretchy. It was so hard to get on and off. Like I literally used to have to lube up my face with dish soap to like slide my head in. And every time I moved I think you can see, yeah, you can, I love that. Okay. So every time I moved my neck, this part of the collar would pop out. And so that's obviously a huge pain in the ass. Now, this photo right now is actually from a mask reference thing that we'll actually get into. In fact, I think I zoom in a little. It's too blurry, but you can see this is not a bad image of Jason. And I took this image and I posted it on Reddit. There's a couple other images that came with it too that I fixed up in Photoshop and things like that. There's one with the sunset that I couldn't find for this. That is one of my favorite shots that I've ever done in cosplay. But as you can see, this is a pretty standard Jason. And one of the things I obviously noticed, like I'm not a big guy. I don't throw up heavy weights and get all yoked out and all that stuff. And I never really thought Jason was ever supposed to be really that yoked out, but there is something to the hydrocephalic, sort of larger than, Georgie of Mice and Men style kind of big lug that's out there crushing people's heads because he's got so much strength. He's got that, that sort of simpleton strength, we'll call it, instead of using another awful word. So, obviously, like I look slender in this. I was running around in this. This was fun. This short ended up not working out. I got to try to find it somewhere. It's got to be on a lost drive somewhere. And I will try to hunt it down. I actually think that there's an editorial folder with it somewhere on a hard drive, and maybe one day we'll all hold hands and we'll watch the first version of this. So from there, let me pop back out of this. So that's where we're starting. But what I have is actually so with that in mind, I was like, I want to go back to the drawing board, and I want to come up with something that is that really speaks to the entire franchise. That, like, I wanted to sort of come up with something that was new and fresh based on what I was seeing out of the films, and something that felt like it was growing out of the original franchise. So with that in mind, I'm going to switch to this view, show and tell, boom. And we're going to go through each of the Jasons. So Jason from part one, designed by Tom Savini, played by Ari Lehman. As you can see, Jason here with the hydrocephalic head. What I really love is what they did at the end of the movie. This image to the right, like the way that he's all gunked up, and he actually, that feels very 70s grindhouse giallo film with that. I think they did a great job with that. When he's out there drowning, of course, like when he's fresh, he looks almost like a dolphin. But over here, like you get the messed up teeth, the hydrocephalic head. This was all Tom Savini's idea to do this to Jason. I think in the original script, like, there was nothing wrong with Jason. He was a little slow and quiet, but he wasn't hydrocephalic. He didn't have those issues. Part two, we go to Carlton. I believe it's Carl Fulton did this makeup, but Warrington Gillette and Steve Dash playing Jason. We see him grown up with no explanation. This is one of the most controversial things with Jason. We see him growing up. We see him in this flannel with the overalls. The hydrocephalic sticks with him. You see the teeth. You got the red hair, and now he's a ginger. He's got the beard. All of this stuff. I was never a huge fan of this look, like him coming out and being the wild man. Was not my favorite look. Which brings me to part three, which played by Richard Brooker. I believe this might have been Carl Fulton, but I know that, like, Rick Baker did a mask and a few people did a mask for this one, but we're obviously using the mask that was used in the actual film. Jason in this movie loses his hair, keeps most of that stuff, but this is, I think, one of the best faces I've ever seen for Jason. So Jason's costume obviously changes to the Harold look, which is something that I believe most Friday the 13th fans know Jason for. The green, it's the green Sears work shirt. It's a grayish, work pants. Very simple. You know what I mean? He takes them off the line. Harold's clothes. You see, I mean, look at all the work in here with, all the hydrocephalic work in the neck and the behind the ear and all that stuff. Like, Jason really sort of this is where Jason really started to bulk out. Richard was a big guy. I believe he was 6'3", so he's a little bit taller here. And with this face, I mean, this image was so good. And I can see why they went with this ending versus the Rick Baker ending with the other mask. This one just looks so much better and so menacing. Definitely has a sort of a Goonies vibe. So definitely slothy in this. You can see the inspiration in there. But part three is really, I think, where Jason really locked in his look. You know what I mean? Like, this is the Jason that we know and love, comes from this. This is obviously where the hockey mask was introduced. The very early version, which we're going to get into the hockey mask a little later. We're going to take actually a very close up look at that part three mask. I have some really good reference of it, or a really good reference of a repro, but we'll get into that in a little bit. But this is what changed the face of Jason, and this is what he's known for. So when you're starting a look of Jason, you sort of have to perfect this first, and then you have to work around it. So moving on, we're also going to think about sort of the story of Jason here. So, flipping back just a little bit, here's our seed. This is where it starts. So we have, like, we call keyframes in film, or we have tent pole sequences. So, like, things that just that like are locked in, that you're working your story to. And so in here, we know that, like, we're starting with a hydrocephalic young boy who is 12 years old. The size of him is, maybe he's like between 5'6" and 5'10". He seems like a large enough kid here. When we see Jason in part two, Steve Dash, I believe, was only 5'10". Warrington Gillette's not very tall either. He wasn't a giant imposing figure. He was just a wildebeest sort of creature of the forest. Now, I love that personality. I love that sort of, him making a home in the woods and, scourging things and building a life. I really think that's an interesting thing from a character perspective. But I prefer the look that he's bald. Like he should also have alopecia. Like tack that onto what he has. Because I think when Jason has hair, there's just something I don't love about it. And even though when you go into part 4, which is an extension of that look, and he does have little bits and pieces of hair, it's just very unnoticeable. Very sorry about this image. It got really, really creeped, really crappy. But I think if anything in this movie, like Ted White takes over the mantle, Tom Savini comes back to do the makeup. Jason in these first, like the first 4 movies, between part 1 and part 5, why did that go like that? Between part 1 and part 2, there's 5 years that pass, and then The Weeknd, he goes from this fresh 5'10", wildebeest to a 56-year-old man who's like been burnt. And so there's obviously no consistency, but what you see is the things that, like, the teeth are messed up, what's going on with the face. The right side of the face is the one that's sort of, has some palsy, maybe is like drooping a little bit and has less control. That's where the, the eyes pushed out, and the left eye is the one that's more dominant, the one that he sees with. Obviously, we were carrying over the wound from part 3. He has more of an undead look in the film. I mean, if you look at the prop right there, ignore my crappy photo. I don't even know how that happened. But if you look at sort of like the image behind him, the hand is very decayed. And I talked to Joe Zito about this, and he said that Jason is undead in this film, that he does reanimate. So in my head, for all these years, trying to figure out whether Jason was a boy who, fell apart, who drowned and then somehow survived and lived in the woods, versus one that just came back the night of his mother's death. I always found that, like, I actually was on the side of that he had to have survived, because that's the way it works. He's human Jason. And the more I watched the films and the more I studied them, the more I realized that it was more interesting for him to resurrect from the bottom of the lake. And that what I'm sort of getting out of the story here is that, like, him coming back is sort of fresh, getting deader and getting deader. And all of a sudden, the more damage he's taking, the more he's sort of rapidly aging, the more he's withering, the more he's, decomposing. And then eventually he's going to turn into what we see to him in a couple movies. Jason in part 5, I just took this single image because this is basically Jason throughout the entire movie. The mask changes 3 times. Here why I picked this one was very interesting that at the beginning of the movie with the flashback sequence, which I think I was shot like after the rest of the movie was done, or maybe it was before all that, the straps are actually on the inside of the mask. But mostly with Tom Morga playing Jason in these scenes, it's basically the same thing from part 4. It's a repro of part 4. The same things are happening. It's the same thing, but it's the simple Harold look where it's the Dickies top and the gray pants. Now things start to get interesting. When we get to part 6, we get into the part of undead Jason for true form. A lot of people will refer to him as zombie Jason. But he's not an undead, creature thirsting after brains and trying to eat human flesh. He is a revenant. He is something that is born of a curse and is just, cursed not to die. And this is the first time with Tom McLaughlin taking over as director, and him being resurrected from the ground. We see more of a decayed looking Jason. And although we don't get a great look at his face in the film, the shadows are very heavy on the face, so you never really get to see it. There are a good couple glimpses. And in my opinion, this is when Jason really started to get scary. That face, like, shouldn't be moving. He shouldn't be moving. But the fact that he's still moving, there's something really creepy about that. Obviously, CJ Graham takes over here. So now Jason's 6'5", so somehow grew 2 inches in the grave. Still mostly working with the same costume, the Harold costume. There's the green top. The pants went from a slightly heather grayish more towards a tan in this. And then the addition in this film were the yellow gloves and the tool belt. When I was a kid, I thought the tool belt was kind of cool. As an adult, not as much of a fan of the tool belt, not as much of a fan of the yellow gloves. I kind of want to see the hands. I kind of want to see the work that's going on there. I think that makes it more interesting, but I can see from a cost saving factor how that would work. I also want viewers who are watching right now to pay attention sort of to the decomposition of the face, the way everything's kind of looking. We know that Tommy chopped his good eye, so now his other eye becomes his dominant eye, the one that's hydrocephalic and not supposed to be the one he sees very well with. And, in these films, it's sort of like you saw CJ Graham's eye, it was very clean, but we knew that that was sort of like more of a production cost error versus, them trying to be super accurate with it. Moving on to part 7, where John Carl Buechler took over, and this is considered one of the best costumes, with all the decayness, being able to see Jason's rib cage, knowing that he is definitely an undead killing machine. He's been under the water for all these years. We see very clearly the previous damage that he's taken, the additional damage that he takes from this, the bullet holes, the axe mark, the machete marks, all these different things. The only thing that I always found about this costume when the mask came off was that the mouth was very Muppety, and the acting and the eyeball sort of being there always sort of threw me off, because it's like, how is that eyeball surviving versus everything else? Obviously, it's a horror film, so I really shouldn't be paying that much attention. But what I do like in this is that they did have the sense to use fabric to black out the eyes. Now, when you watch it in HD, now I think it's kind of ruined because you can see the fabric and it kind of ruins it. But this is something I loved about this Jason, was that the eyes were always very dark. You couldn't see through the eyes. And when you're only watching it on a 480p VHS tape, you couldn't see the things. Now that it's in 4K, you can probably get it. The detail almost ruins the mask because you can see the costume working. And anytime you can see the costume working, you're taking people out of the movie. They know it's now a costume piece versus that. But, obviously the mask damage showing the teeth, the machete mark lining up with the head, all of those different things, beautiful work. The hands are exposed. We see the bones sticking through the fingers. This is something I was really inspired to early on, because I really wanted to get to something that looked like this, because this is the fun stuff. This is like, I think that John Carl Buechler and Tom, but here John really took care to say, we're going to make sure that Jason is accurately represented. Every single wound that he had from every single movie is represented on this costume. It is definitely awesome. Too bad the movie isn't as good as the costume is. And then what will bring me into sort of the final segment for the Never Hike Alone side of things is our good friend Pumpkinhead Part 8 Jason, where all of a sudden this is where the costume really starts to slide off the map. Like, we really got some good costume work in the previous one. He was still in his Herald costume, where it was green top, gray pants. They were just shredded to all hell, and he was in a full body suit. Somewhere between Part 7 and Part 8, Jason got an all black costume for the Herald look. So he had the button-up shirt and he had the pants. And even though it was an alteration to the way he looked, I still don't mind this look. His new hockey mask, because the previous hockey. Now, this is another important factor. In Part 7, the hockey mask is destroyed. That hockey mask, which is supposed to be the one that transitions all the way from either Part 4 or Part 6, depending on what timeline you follow, that mask is destroyed. A new mask is introduced at the beginning of Part 8 that has like reverse chevrons, much smaller. It looks like he's got two like a French mustache. Like, that's the way I always sort of looked at that, the Part 8 mask. But for some reason, it's got an axe chop in it. So why is that there? Also, some different types of bolts around the rivets around the mask and stuff like that were different. But again, at the end of this movie, when the mask comes off, the mask is destroyed. It's hit with toxic waste. It's melted. Jason's face is melted. And just taking a look at this right here, such a downgrade. I mean, so the reason why I did these back to back is look at that downgrade. Like, that is just, I know he took Stephen King's pen to the eye there, but he's got no eyes here. He's about to vomit a bunch of sewer water. Just not Jason's best look. But as far as the Never Hike Alone world goes, this is where our timeline leaps off. And we leap off of, Jason being washed out to sea, and the toxic waste and all the things that have happened to him basically destroy his costume and destroy his mask. So the Jason that we're going to get after this film is going to be completely new and different. But before I go there, I have to go over the films that drove me to design something new, because this is the sort of like the era of Friday the 13th, where I went from like loving everything that was coming out to questioning why everything was happening the way it was. So moving on to Jason Goes to Hell. This is one of my least favorite costumes. Again, the costume is it's monotone. It's only one color. It's the same top as the same bottom. All of a sudden he's in a Michael Myers costume. Here he's got sort of a Santa belt that he's wearing that I always thought was a little odd. They have him in a full bodysuit. So like Kane is in a head to toe bodysuit that's hydro cooled. He's really yoked out for this movie. And then that bodysuit makes him bigger. Jason in this entire movie feels very bloated. We'd never see a look at his face. We were supposed to see it as a demon. But, here we're looking at like a beautiful rendition of Kane Hodder's eye. We see both eyes. And I think that was a big mistake to see that. You see that the head kind of melting around the mask. And I think that sort of takes away from the mask itself. Now, in this wider shot, it's not as bad. You can actually see the Part 7 mask in there, but the Part 7 mask was destroyed. And this doesn't look like the Part 8 mask. And the head is just so large around it. This is where I started, and look, you can see a little bit of hair too, but this is where I really started to say, like, there's just too much happening here. This is too busy. This is too distracting. And the mask doesn't stand out as well as it should. And plus the story's all over the place. So we didn't really get this Jason much in the film. And when we do get it, it's just sort of not, again, going back to these simple looks, like it just looks so much better. But then we go to Jason X. This is actually when the jacket was introduced. So you see him with this brown leatherish jacket around sort of the same costume he's wearing in Jason Goes to Hell, the monocolored top and bottom, which are both the same color, but now the brown to like the pop into there. We see here that the mask is very different. It's got this scooped nose. It's much sleeker and smaller, which is actually sort of the Ghost Hawk sort of fits in this world. I can actually see the Ghost Hawk becoming this mask with more age type thing. We get Jason's face. This movie was all about regeneration. And, as we know, like, so he's regenerated here and, they want to study it. But that's his face. And, we don't see much of it in the film. And I can't say that like we would have gotten much out of seeing it anyway. So them, holding that back was sort of probably a good idea. Then obviously we got Jason X, which was just ridiculous. Everything here is just, this is just pure popcorn fluff. You're just going to have fun with it. The work is very impressive. The way the nanobots rebuild him, but just what Kane is wearing here, the fact that this is a costume that he is in, it's sort of silly. Like if you look really close, you can see that he's wearing black gloves. And it's sort of like a suit that fits around his wrist. And, the way the mask fits on, the way he looks here, I feel like this was like comic relief for Friday the 13th fans. I think it's a design that's cool on his own, but when you're looking at building a brand new Jason, this probably isn't where you're going. So now we go to Freddy versus Jason, where the modern Jason was sort of really coming into shape. This I've always referred to as hobo Jason. So, up top, we see the hockey mask. This is where I felt like Jason really turned into a generic Universal Studios monster ride monster. He's very Frankenstein-y here. We never get to see his face in the movie. I do think that this is I do actually think this is a decent work on a head. I'm not a big fan of the hair. I don't like if you ask me, the way the hair looks when it gets hit with the highlights in the background behind his head on, the picture to the left, and you see it draping off his head to the picture of the right. I'm not a big fan of that. I think that that's busy. I think that doesn't add anything to the character. I don't think that hair helps his design at all. I think if that head is shaved and we got like a nice smooth head there, I think you have a much better shape around that. The hair doesn't add to it. We also have multiple layers going on now. We have the jacket in full form. The jacket is really bulky. It's brown. The undershirt, as you see, it's sort of like a blue and a gray. And there's actually some inspiration for Ghost Jason in here, where what I liked about the idea here is that it got the sense that he eventually put on his mother's sweater and he was wearing it under the jacket. He's got the big pants here. The pants are black. What I really hate about this costume are the platform boots. Ken Kersinger is already 6'7". Why did he need to be 7 feet tall? Jason just overall in this movie looks kind of dopey, looks kind of dumb. Again, you can see his eyeballs. You can see the humanity in there, and not have, obviously they're starting to use that eyepiece that they stick under the other one. So, the actor can't even see out of that right eye hole. I'm not a huge fan of this mask. Even though it's right back to part three, for this, it feels like where is the continuity in the mask, and where did he get this one? And it's just sort of, it's not menacing. I don't feel scared of this Jason. If this Jason walked by my window, I wouldn't be menaced by it. He feels very much like Lenny from Mice and Men, just kind of doping around. And when he does get moving in Freddy versus Jason, I will say that when he runs in Freddy versus Jason, because he does run in Freddy versus Jason, he drags Freddy through that entire block of windows. He's like full on booking it. There is some power to this Jason, and he is definitely very strong. He does some very impressive things. I always felt like the costume diminished it. I feel like if you have Freddy versus this Jason, I think you're talking about a movie that the fans really wanted to see. Freddy versus this Jason is not quite where we wanted to go. And I think that we sort of just took this and accepted it, but we were all kind of like, it's good, but not great. Flash forward 5 or 6 years later, we get what most people consider a very good looking Jason with Derek Mears. I've been on record as saying I'm not a huge fan of it, and I'll go over why. Looking at the image of the right, again, going right to the hair, I don't see what we're getting out of the hair in that picture that makes Jason an imposing figure. The hair just kind of looks like it shouldn't be there. It feels like it's in the way, and it kind of ruins sort of the shape of his head in general. Again, we're going with the large jacket, but we're working with a black overtone. We got the tan, undershirt, and then we got brown pants. The double-bladed axe here. He's using like this machete hilt. And this is when, to me, Jason became a G.I. Joe figure. I wasn't a huge fan of this mask. I felt that the way it fit, like, the funny thing is in this image, the one to the right, it actually fits his face very well in the image. For some reason on camera, looking at the shot to the left, it felt less like it fit him. And I felt like a lot of it was the extra work they did down here on Derek Mears' face, which we never got to see in the movie. There's just a lot of extra effects going on over the actor's face that the mask doesn't fit that great over it. And I thought that they didn't need to do as much as they did with Derek's face. Not that Derek's an ugly guy, but Derek has alopecia. I think that they could have made more of a use of what's actually there versus making him wear a giant hood and doing a lot of that stuff. I felt like he naturally fits the size of Jason. He didn't need to be yoked out even more. I do like the bag head in this look. I think that was incredibly great. I think Jason looks best in this movie with that, but I wasn't a huge fan of the jacket because of the sizing that it was. And it always sort of like, as you can see in like the shot to the left, it was sort of a trench coat. It was really, really big, and it overtook his entire character, which I didn't feel like. I felt like we were getting away from this stuff. I felt like we were getting away from that part 3, 4, 6 look that really kind of solidified Jason. We're really going all in on the jacket. And I wasn't a huge proponent of the jacket. So with all that out of the way, let me just quickly come back to you guys. Let me throw this back up. So, for me, when I was sitting down to think about like what I wanted to do with the character, wow, 63 comments. I'm probably missing so much. Hang on a second. I gotta look at this. All right, only nobody did super chat, so I can't really see it. So I'm not going to jump through just yet. If you want something like for this, because I got to keep paying attention to this stuff. If you guys want to ask a question, I do have to really request that you do super chats, because it's going to be too much. Don't push the red button. Yeah. So let's go back to this. Okay, so we're over here. I have to just move around. Let me see. So there's one image I want to show from this folder. So early on, as I was scouring the internet for different pieces of reference, I came across this drawing. I can't remember where I found it. I mean, I was Google searching the hell out of it, but there was something about this overall aesthetic that I thought, here is the blend between the old and the new Jason that we're missing, where it feels worn with the character. It feels backwoodsy. It feels in Jason's thing. And this is the sort of shape that I wanted to get. Obviously not this skinny, but I'm also a skinny guy. So when I was thinking about taking it from that previous image that I showed you guys, which I believe I put in, not there. Was it in ref? Hold on, sorry guys. I'm trying to remember where I put that. Yeah, as you can see, I was right here. So as you can see, not as, obviously kind of fitting that, but kind of going from there, um, going back up to close, going back up to that. So that's where I really wanted to start with it. And early on, oh shit, whoops, boop, there we go. Close. So early on, I kind of had some different images in this. I mean, this is literally what I dragged over. This is a good image to look at, even though it's the toy. So, I mean, really the basic construction in the start of it is when you really look at it, the top and bottom here, the definitive colors between the two. At first I was gray, but I did shift to brown. And it was sort of kind of going there. Let me see, but let's get into the Hock. So when it came to, putting the costume together, actually we can go into the costume because I have this. So let's talk about what Jason is built out of. Boop. We're going to work from the ground up. So here, as you can see, the boots is where I started. These are Vietnamese, or like from Vietnam era paratrooper boots. I just wanted something simple, smooth, and black. As you can see here, this is just a very simple shape, very thin sole. So, obviously, like with Jason in Freddy versus Jason, he had that big, thick sole. You know what I mean? So I was like, definitely not that. We don't need to do any platforms. We don't need to do any of that stuff. What I wanted something was simple that wouldn't distract. Again, just as simple as possible. I really liked these eyelets. It was very easy to lace up. I could get them very tight around my ankle. These were very sturdy, very easy to walk around in. And these boots, I believe, are still with the original mannequin, which Tom Spina made for Dirk Mueller. But these are the boots that get put on the mannequin. And every time we remake the costume, we always try to hunt for a pair just like this. For the jacket, as you can see, this is actually the first jacket for Never Hike Alone. This is the screen used jacket that I wore. It's not the Old Navy version that I wear now, that I'm actually wearing right at this moment. This is something I found on Amazon. I believe it was some sort of knockoff of a knockoff. I wasn't a big fan of the type of fabric that it was. It was very easy to rip. In fact, this jacket almost got ripped in half, basically, from putting it on and off so many times. We did a lot of work with like cutting off pockets. You can see where we cut off, we cut the hood out. So what we did is, this is a military M65 jacket. And to me, this looks a lot like the Herald shirt. This to me, if you're going to do a jacket, and this was my thinking, was if you're going to do the jacket, you got to pay homage to Harold. And so I had the Dickie shirt that I was wearing in that other photo, and I had this, and I was going back and forth on both of those things before I made the final decision to go with what I went with. Here you can look at the back, very simple. You can see right here, this is where it was ripping. So this was really coming apart towards the end of Never Hike Alone. We never see behind Jason or see this, but we were constantly keeping an eye out for this rip, because it was gonna kill us. But see, it's just, there's no frills. There's nothing hanging off of it. It doesn't have, if you looked at part 9, it had that like waffle knit on the shoulders. It had texture. It was sort of doing all of these different things. And this just goes back to the simplicity of a simple green sleeve, a simple green shirt, kind of dealing with that. With that open. So we played with it closed and we played with it open, but either way that went, we always wanted to have something underneath to always hide the silicone head. So with that, I actually had this Volcom snowboarding Henley that I wore a lot, and it had a couple of holes in it, and I just started to mess with it. And this shape that sort of developed right here was by accident. I actually was taking the paintbrush out and I accidentally hit it like that, but it sort of made Jason's face in the shirt, which I thought was kind of cool. Like if you look here, it feels like it's half of Jason's face. We had this, it was very simple. Again, that was sort of inspired by Freddy versus Jason, because I did like the concept of him wearing something that felt like the sweater underneath the shirt. We cut off, I cut off the collar here. That way it didn't have any smooth edges. just a lot of coffee staining. There's actual like wood stain on here that I use. You know, we obviously try to like the blood of him like chopping bodies and picking up people and carrying people around. Obviously, we didn't do much work on the sleeves because we were never going to see those, and we just chopped up the ends of the thing. Underneath, we went with a simple green army t-shirt. Again, a lot of coffee staining, a lot of dark tide staining, just so there's something underneath the holes and you're not seeing the black stunt padding that we would wear. And we use the black padding to sort of like just bulk out a little bit. But because we were doing fights and we had to wear pads, we didn't want to see discernible differences between a padded Jason and a non-padded Jason. So stunt pads sort of became part of the costume, which I probably just should have put on. I didn't have a chance to. Here are the original pants. These are Dickie Duck pants. That's the original belt. That's the original pant. As you can see, didn't do much. You know what I mean? It's, you know, we chopped up these, added the hole for like the, you know, the stab through the leg. And so these are things I was starting to kind of pull over. Obviously, these aren't the gray pants like from part 2 and 3, but when I looked at the location that we were shooting in, it really sort of matched that aesthetic. It was the green and the brown. I saw a lot of, you know, dark browns and forest greens. And so that really became the color palette that I followed, because that's actually what they follow in part 6, which is my favorite Jason, or it was my favorite Jason, and sort of a design look. But I didn't want to go as far as the utility belt or do anything distracting. So we went back to like, again, like, remember what I said about Jason Goes to Hell and the big Santa belt? Well, this is a very understated, simple belt that just takes its place and doesn't draw the eye away from anything. And it actually sits mostly under the costume. You know, we're going to skip ahead a little bit. We're going to talk about the mask in a second. Obviously, like, take a good look. This is the original Ghost Hawk. This is the one that was used in every single Never Hike Alone. This is the main hero Hawk in all 4 films. We had it from the beginning. In a minute, we're going to get into the creation of this mask. And we're going to talk a little bit more about it, but I just want to give people more of a look at the hood. So this hood is a CFX deformed hood. Very simple. It's got a Freddy versus Jason look, but look, no hair. Look at how smooth and easy that looks and how well it just fits. There's nothing sticking off of it. There's nothing shooting out. You know, there's nothing distracting about it. When Jason looks at you in the frame, it's just the mask. There's no melted head coming around. There's nothing. There's just something about those 2 dark eyes and the ghostly mask. And even if this had chevrons, you know what I mean? Like, it's just something about, that's the image that needs to stand out. This was one of the earliest shots that we took of Jason, sort of once we put the costume together. This is me without padding on. So this is one of the things we noticed that, okay, we have to really start wearing the pads, because there's a big difference when I'm wearing them and I'm not wearing them. And for that, here's a shot of when I'm wearing it with the pads, without the pads, with the pads, and how more imposing this looks to give him the shoulders, to give him that work, not totally yoked out, but kind of going there. Oh, one thing I guess I skipped over were the hands, which we had, which were called, in fact, I actually have the folder. We can actually go back real quick. The hands, which are called Krusty Gloves. So originally, I had actually done this for CFX, where I wanted to take these sort of, again, these patchy things that draw your eye away from those things, and we just covered them up. And so this were the original hands. The problem was that we had a gray hood and we had these sort of humanish hands. And so Kelsey, our effects artist, is always like, you can't do this. Like, we got to make sure we don't show them together. So where was I? Okay, I was here. Boop, boop. Thank you guys for sticking with me through this. I hope you're learning something. I hope this is valuable for you. Let's see. I'm going to skip over the face for now. We're just going to look at some behind the scenes looks of sort of like the costume and the way that it all kind of came together. This is Brian in costume. So you see him, he's got the shoulder pads on. Here we get to see, you can kind of see here where it's ripping, and you can see how it's stitched together, barely kind of going there. But again, like, oh, and here's actually Donnie Nichols. Here's a shot of Donnie Nichols, Andrew's stunt double. Shot of the pants, sort of the way it fit. These were a little bit of skinny jeans. I will say they were a little tighter than we intended, but hey, it worked. Here's, I think here's a really great shot of like the costume well lit, the way it all comes together. This to me, like, again, we're just talking about the costume for now. We're gonna get in the mask in a little bit. But for me, like when you talk about like the jacket and the old look, this to me, when it came together like this, felt as if it was the perfect blend between old and new. That we got the jacket look, we got some of the nice things that the jacket can do, which really accentuates movement. We see it flap in and out, and we see it, and, as he moves, the jacket opens and closes. It gives it a little bit more of an interesting feel versus what you see when it's just sort of like it really wrapped around him. I think it sort of simplifies it. Just some more shots. You can see how bad the wig was sometimes. This is one of my favorite shots. This is actually Brian in costume. This is actually the stunt mask. You can tell because the F is just a little different. You can hear, but this mask actually got damaged. This is the one that Andrew punched and a piece of paint came off, and we switched to the other mask, and that became the mask full time. One of my saddest things about Never Hike Alone 1 is that we shot this room and we designed the friggin' hell out of it. Look, we set up the arrows, all that stuff. We had all these masks on the thing. We barely see it in the movie. It was I was like, I can't believe we didn't do it. Let me see what else we got going here. This is one of my favorite shots. Again, just kind of looking through. We're just kind of doing some behind the scenes stuff that we never got used. Oh, here's a couple cool shots. Again, I don't have the padding on, so there's a little bit slender here, but these shots were taken by Ashley Covington during a snowstorm early on. This is one of my favorite shots. I posted it earlier today, but I wish we would have used it more. Obviously, again, you can kind of see what happens when this thing gets pulled out. We had to fix that a lot. And here's a good look at Jason's face. So let's talk about Jason's face for a little bit before we get into the mask, because I know we'll get into the mask in a little bit. But taking from all the other faces, here's like one of the best shots of our Ghost Jason mask. Now, I do have my eye open here, but during all shots when we're on screen, I close my eyes because I wanted Jason's eyes to be two empty sockets. You can see we used the misleveled, eye. We had the lower eye than this one. This was all sculpted and made by Kelsey Burke and applied by Kelsey Burke. In fact, I have a photo of her right over here. I'll show it to you guys in a little bit. But, she did this great thing where like the hair lip where it got deteriorated, so it got pulled back. The teeth aren't as crazy. Again, things that aren't distracting. Like, where's your eyes going? Your eyes are going towards Jason eyes here. You kind of seeing thing like the damage. We did the boat damage with the jaw. The axe wound is sort of healed. The machete wound is there and sort of like healed in the undead way. But when we shot it, you see we kind of like draped this shadow across the face. We hid the nose because it was one thing we didn't have time to build. And I have a big ass nose. So trying to hide it was hard. So we hid it with a shadow. So the light hits the eye, gets the darkness and gets the darkness of this. And then you see the teeth, which are the gnarly things that make it really cool. Another good shot here, which is, we learned a lot, but actually, who I kind of look like in this? I don't know if you guys watch Preacher, but the guy who looks like butt face, who's got like the butthole mouth. Anyone who watches Preacher, shout out to that character. He's got a little bit of that mouth here. That character tried to blow his face off with a shotgun and didn't work. And then obviously behind the scenes, this is what it looked like with all the lights on. You can see our backup Ghost Jason mask in the background. We ordered this because our other mask, and I think it might have been this one that I'm wearing, started to rip. I don't know if it was this one or the other one, but it started to rip, and we had this one as a backup, but it wasn't painted correctly. So we had to like make this one work, and we made this work. The way that this was put on is I'm actually wearing a mask like this. She took this, built it to fit within that cutout, and then blended it around the edge of the mask. And so all of this is blended onto something that's there. You can kind of see the difference, but when you darken it up and you light it really well, you don't necessarily kind of go into there. So there's that. Boopity boop, boop, boop. Let's go into the Ghost Hawk. So I'm going to show you some interesting kind of early concept art that I did that is not great. I was just sort of experimenting at this point. early on coming up with the original idea. This is actually the mask I think that they were going to use in the David Bruckner one. Not that they were going to use this mask. I designed this mask, but they were going to make it simple like this. And that's just kind of cool how like different minds kind of go alike. But early on, I was trying to think of like how I would redesign the mask and what I would do. This was sort of like an early idea of just like where my head was at. And then I did this thing called the mask launch. And so then I contacted CFX and we talked about different masks. You know, obviously this is the Freddy versus Jason mask, but the mask that I was really inspired by was this. When I saw this mask online, I was like, how do I get this to look like a Friday the 13th mask? Because everything within this look is something that feels new. It feels sort of pushed forward, but it still has that foot in the past because obviously this is an old hockey mask, but this isn't the same old thing. I loved this. I loved the scarring around that eye. I loved this F on the cheek. I actually liked these sullen, sunken eyes. I liked that the whole pattern was different. And so I did a little bit of work and I did this. I made this, I kept that. I just sort of like said, let's shoot for something like that. And then let's go through the rest of what's going on here. I was also inspired, obviously, by the original mask, like the Jacques Plante mask. So I was looking here for things like texture and shape and just different ideas of how masks were constructed because I wanted Jason to feel like he was wearing a mask from the late 60s era, something from that time, something from the past. Another look at the Jacques Plante mask. Here's a look at me in my old costume. This is the old latex hood. This is the NECA Repro mask, and this is me in a Dickies coverall shirt. So it's pretty simple. You know, taking a look at the inside of the mask. Obviously, these are made with fiberglass. You know, more Jacques Plante. Just like constantly going through and looking the shape of things. You know, contemplating of like, what would this look like on somebody? You know, looking at Jacques Plante, looking at there. How does that translate to Jason? Obviously, he's not trying to make a horror movie here, but this was all the reference that I wanted to look at, and so. Now I got it in here. I showed you guys this before. So I was using this as sort of like, this is our starting point. Another thing I really liked were when they redid, I'm trying to remember the names of these movies. Oh, if I keep looking at them and go, it was like the racing movies with Jason Statham, but they had Frankenstein and he had this mask and there was something sort of new and Death Race 3000 or Death Race 2000. There's something about this mask that I thought was very interesting. There's something about that. And again, I was trying to search for something new. And this is just a reference folder. So talking about all the different ways it can go, you know, I thought this was really nice. Again, I found the original Jacques Plante mask that like the films were made out of. And then I found this mask. So there was this mask that had a nice, simple, ghostly shape to it. It was, you know, it was molded to the face. It looked pretty cool. So I did something that looked like this of like, what would it look like if you took some of that stuff away and just sort of simplified it and got it into that type of look? Same thing. This, I sort of started playing with different hole patterns. And then I found this mask, which I thought was very interesting. This is somebody's own repro. It looks like a 2009. I'm not a big fan of like the cereal bowl shape of it, but I loved the weathering. And I love the way that this was water stained. And I thought that there was a lot of good things going on here. So from here, that was the mask ref. Let me see what else. Oh, so here's even more ref. I know this might not be too fun, but there's just more stuff that I was finding that I thought was kind of cool. Again, I was liking the shapes of like the mask, the way it would fit. Most of this is most of the same stuff. Like we're looking at things like this, you know, I just liked his demeanor there. And again, more Jacques Plante stuff and all that fun stuff. So now let's look at the first ever mold of the mask. So this is actually, these are actually one of the first molds from the work with CFX. They sent this mask back first. So with the eyes in mind, with all of that stuff in mind, this is basically where I was at. This was what I got for the original two images. So they sent me this and they sent me this. And so I went in and I sort of did some notes where you can see how I wanted to get the whole pattern right. I went in and sort of traced over, you know, the other movies, and I kind of just, you know, we wanted to make some adjustments, but mostly I wanted to get this crux down here. And I think that that's one of the things that go there. In fact, here's an image of like when I had the part 3 mask, and I was wearing the CFX hood about how it got closer, but I didn't love doing the part 3 look. I wanted to do something original. So pulling it down and getting this shape helped versus this feeling sort of like a little higher up pancake facey. I sort of sent this mask as more reference. I mean, look at this part 3 mask. This is almost perfect. I think this might be a Crash Cunningham. But it looked really, really good. And so we used that as reference. They went back to the drawing board and they went into this. So now we were getting closer. We had the right shape. You know, we were getting this. And now it was sort of just getting, again, it was too big. There was too much space. There was too much volume at the top. And so I wanted to get the top a little bit more so it was more balanced. Kind of see here. You see, it feels like a little bit like an alien. The way it got pushed up here, there's all this extra space. There's, you know, here's the hole and there's all this extra space up here. I knew that that just wasn't going to sit well on the face, but we were starting to get sort of the mask here. So I believe, you know, you saw how I kind of brought it in a field and I brought them in from being all the way out there to bring them it down, which really, really helped, which took to our next round. Okay, great. With our next round of stuff. And that's when I started to realize that the eyes were really creating a problem. And we needed to go with a more of a classic shape in order to get it there. And you can kind of see here, he's really locking in the holes. For where the ventilation holes, where those are going to be. The mask is starting to feel better on this kind of shape. We just need to get those eyes right. So going back, so that was that one. So here's actually the final mold. No notes. So here's what we ended up going with, which this you can see it. You can see, you know, we talked about getting the direct line. Everything works from here. Like again, remember the Jason X look? You can kind of see the Jason X look in this. We just gave this a little bit more of a nose. We didn't scoop it out. We have that classic part 3 kind of boomerang shape that's nice and like it's top heavy, but it's not too top. It's just above center. You know, it has the nice, what I considered sort of shark-like eyes, rounder eyes. And the whole pattern was just sort of like perfectly symmetrical, which is a little bit different from what they did back in the day. Then they did their first mold. So the first mold came out like this. This is pre-paint. You can see just the shape came out so well here. I was really excited when I saw this image, the way that the holes work through each other. I just thought that that was really, really nice. Told them to keep going. And then they sent me this. So this is actually the first time this is the first photo. This actually became a sticker. This actually is a sticker. I think we're reusing this image again. This is what we use for our Never Hike Alone stickers. But this was the first painting of the mask. This was the first ever mask that was made. And this is the hero Ghost Hawk that was used in all 4 films. And you can always tell because of the shape of this F. Keep an eye when you watch the movies on the shape of that F. Sometimes you'll see it change. But for me, going back to that original image, remember how I said that there was like that little painted F there? I asked for that to be there. That little marks over the eyes, we worked that into the design. And I thought that Brett Morris, who molded and painted this mask for CFX, did just a beautiful job of adding just in that. You remember the texture, the waterlogged texture? And this is lighter than where it got because Kelsey and Nora and everybody who worked on the film actually worked to make it darker after we received it. So let's see. We looked at no straps. They actually made a backup mask. So they threw some blood on it for me. So you can see the F is just a little bit different. This backup mask never really made it into the film too much. We used it in a couple of stunt shots, but it never really got used too much. And this is what they sent to me before they sent it to me. So now they get the straps on. We ended up replacing the straps. Believe it or not, they're the straps from the NECA mask. So I ended up using the straps from the NECA mask instead of these ribbed straps. But you just can see the shape is just right there. The way it sits. I was just so happy to get it. And then, you know, that was final. And then we got this. And then, you know, we received this a few weeks later and voila, we were ready to go. We had the look that we had for the movie. So let me remove this. So I do have one more. For those of you who are still with me, we've been going for an hour. I'm not going to finish quite yet like I usually do. I am going to jump in and do some comments. Let me see. How are comments doing? That was a lot. So you guys kind of got to see everything that goes into it. You know, as time has gone on, obviously, like we upgraded to the Old Navy jackets because they're just a better texture. They're easy to manipulate. We still keep a lot of the same work, but the pockets remain a little bit more. We remove, you know, all the interior lining. You know, we remove the hoods. We take those out to take the bulk out. But really, it's nice and simple. Supposed to go. You know, obviously, this is the repro. This is, you know, final version in Jace 2. I mean, in Never Hike Alone 2, but, you know, still looking great. We did, you know, did a little bit of work in here to give him that part 7 sort of, you can see the teeth idea. So you can see the influence of everything that went from the previous movies to create what became Ghost Jason here. You know, a lot of that, you know, story-wise, the way that ended up flowing out mostly came from Jason came back from part 8. He was a completely gray, sort of ghoulish being, no eyes, no teeth. You saw the face the way that it looked. This costume comes from somebody who visited the camp that he took this costume from. This mask comes from the camp. If you watch Never Hike in the Snow, we have that scene where you see masks sort of spread around the ground that Deputy Mabry finds. That mask came from from that pile of masks that were kept in the camp for winter camp. And that's how Jason built himself. He rebuilt stuff that came to the camp. And this was the new look. It's something that is, you know, obviously everything before part 8 was destroyed, so it had to be something new. And so for me, it worked story-wise because we knew we had to rebuild it. And then he looked just as good, if not better, than he did in the past films. And I think, in my opinion, my goal was to have it look better than the last few movies that came out. And I would say that, like, people would probably argue with me with 2009 because a lot of people really love that movie. But when it comes to Freddy versus Jason, Jason Goes to Hell, and Jason X, I would definitely say that our base Jason is I think, as a fan, I don't want to sound like an asshole. I mean, really what it comes down to it, but I like what we designed better than that. And that was my answer to, I like where you're going, but if Jason was in this type of costume, if Jason was built this way and put into those films, I think that those films are that much more enjoyable because Jason looks better. And that was one of the first things with Never Hike Alone we had to do, is we needed to make a Jason that looked really, really good in order to really make that kind of hit home. If people were going to pay attention to us, we need to have a good looking Jason. And without that, everything else would have suffered. So I hope that you guys really liked seeing some of that behind the scenes stuff. I've never been able to show I mean, I used to post it on Instagram a long time ago, but it's tough to see it on Instagram. Being able to see it here, to see, you know, the way the mask came in, you know, it's sort of like, you know, it kind of gives you an idea of how much work sort of went into all of that kind of coming together. You know, the name of Ghost Jason came from 2 different people, Joe Gallo and Brandon Scott Murphy. We were coming up with an idea for what we were going to call the hockey mask for our campaign. I believe for the home video campaign, we were doing hockey mask for the home video campaign. And I said, oh, maybe we should call it the Bone Hawk because it looks like bone. And it's sort of like, it almost feels like skull hawk, bone hawk, blah, blah, blah. And I was kind of in there. And Brandon Scott Murphy, so why don't we call it the Ghost Hawk? It's got a really ghostly look. It doesn't have the chevrons on it. We should talk about that. Yeah, as you can see throughout the entire build of the movie or build of the mask, there were never chevrons on there. And once you saw that first paint, I was so in love with that first paint, I didn't want them to do anymore. I didn't want them to put chevrons on it. I felt like that might be too much. Also, so much time has passed. Let's just say the chevrons washed off. And the whole thing about us being a fan film, if he's got red ones, Roy's got blue ones, and we're a fan film, we have no official mark. So we're an unofficial film. Let's go with the blank. That blank look inspired Brandon to call it the Ghost Hawk. So I was running around with that, being like, I love it. It's called the Ghost Hawk. And so I sent it to another fan, Joe Gallo, who, when we showed him the Ghost Hawk sort of image, and like, so he's like, the Ghost Hawk, that's a cool name for the mask. Does that make him Ghost Jason? And at that point I went, yes, it does. Yes, it absolutely does. That's a brilliant idea. And we started calling him Ghost Jason moving forward. So Ghost Jason was named by the fans. We adopted it, and we've made it a moniker. And now that's what people know him as. He's in the video. He's in the Friday the 13th puzzle video mobile video game as Ghost Jason. If you get 13 daily deaths, so it's pretty cool. It's something that stuck, and it's something that I'm really proud of. This design, building this character, was a lot of fun. It was one of my favorite things from doing on the Never Hike Alone project, was putting this costume together. And so this last thing that I want to show everybody, which is a nice special treat. I've never showed this publicly before because I never had a way to show it publicly before. But before we made Never Hike Alone, many of you probably know we spent a lot of time in the woods, walking around, getting to know the big camp, kind of doing some stuff. And I found, while I was going through these old files, I found this old sort of scout tape of, there's maybe a couple shots of me in costume, but this is some of the earliest stuff of me in costume. And some of it actually made it into the movie. Well, it made it into something. It's actually in the teaser tonight. There's actually a shot in the teaser that I used tonight that's in there. But mostly it's about the camp. And we can do a whole nother episode on the camp and how we found it and all that stuff on another day. I would love to do a tour of it. That would be really cool. I think if I could get back up there and film some stuff, that would be really great. But in lieu of doing that live or doing anything like that, I actually have a tour of it that I'm going to show you right now. And you're just going to have to bear with me because this is the first time I've ever done this live. I don't know how it's going to play. I don't know how the quality is going to hold up. But there is music. There is sort of music that kind of sits underneath it that I used. And so, but none of it's Never Hike Alone music. It's just sort of there to kind of get the vibe. I'm going to talk you over it, and we'll go from there. So without any further ado, I'm going to add this to the stage. Boop. So you can see the old logo. Shout out to the old logo. That's the original Womp Stomp Films logo, because it was supposed to be like the logo on a big foot. That was the original, again, the other logo that we had, but it was a working logo. We never really thought it. So this is our one of our producers, Kyle Klein. This was us testing the camp out when we first got there. Pull that down a little bit. This was us just testing out the camp when we first got there. There's no furniture in here, or nothing that we brought up. There is some furniture. You're going to see it, and you'll recognize some stuff that's actually in the movie. But the rest of it, we filled this place up. This is how we found the place. You get an idea of how much we spent, really working it out. Like you can see, like the windows weren't uncovered yet. There was the big green table that we moved across the yard. But right now we're messing around with cameras. We're working on camera movement. We're working on, character direction. There was an early part in the movie, in the early part of the script, where this sort of was like, boom, like something was going to happen. It was going to draw his attention away. This happens now later in the movie when he hears the thing in the attic. The idea very much expanded when we were kind of going out through all of this stuff. So that was sort of our lead through the main cabin. If you recognize this became the shot of when Kyle discovers the kitchen. Now, this is early on. We weren't working with the GoPro yet. So we just sort of explored the interior of everything. This was another producer, Daniel, who acted as our stand-in before we had Kyle going up to the camp, or Andrew going up to the camp with us. The stairs that lead up to the cabin, you can see there's writing on the walls and things like that. So these were things that we knew that we wanted to hide. But this allowed us, anyone who's a filmmaker out there, doing something like this allows you to just get in tune with the space that you're going to be filming in, to understand where you're going to move, where you need to put light. Like we had a nice bounce coming in right here to help illuminate Daniel's face. This is Jason's bedroom. So we were working on a footpath to get Kyle upstairs into Jason's bedroom. And those two scenes helped us sort of navigate that. Now, this is another thing that I was we're going to jump around the camp right now. Every time he walks through a door, he's basically jumping to a different building, except right there. That is the natural passageway between Steve Christie's office, which this room, if you can kind of recognize it, that became the Kevin Bacon room that we built with the bunk beds. So this is what the room looked like before we got up there. And then if you watch the movie and you watch the bunk bed scene, this is what that room became afterwards. This was back to the main cabin. We built a hallway there for this door. That leads into the main hall. You can see that's where Jason grabs his machete. That's the big windows that we use. So very much right now, we were just sort of using what we had at our disposal just to see what the space looked like. You can see the ideas of like what was going to happen, how, where the kernel started. So here's one of our first Jason tests. We'll look at this a couple of times. Trying a little cane harder breathing. So yeah, so this was just mostly like Jason looking out the window. All of a sudden you walk into the room and he sees you. And this is sort of the timing of how I wanted to turn and how I wanted to get the movement. You know, again, look at the camera movement here done by Chris Bellis, like the nice drifting cameras, the parallaxing background, you know, all of those things. So this was also, again, I believe this is when we started shooting with the Sony A7S II. So this is some of the first A7S II footage that we have. And so that's why it's a little bit sharper. It's a little bit cleaner. The other stuff was shot with, I believe, my Canon 5D Mark II with Magic Lantern. And this is just literally kind of looking around. You can see we had like little lights just to do accents. There's that thing again. This was an outhouse. This shot was actually used in the movie. That was used as a time thing. Oh, there we go. There's another test right there. And so look at the swiftness of Jason moving here. Like I'm not running, but I got speed. And that was one of the things I wanted to work on for this was like intensity, speed. Jason is coming. And I thought that was pretty cool. Stepping on, you can hear me step on the glass. Hang on. Oh. And I'm actually stepping on glass there. That's not additional sound effects. This was an early machete grab. So Brian does this in the film. I did this here. This was, again, me moving fast, moving with intensity, seeing the way that sort of Jason sort of carries here. And we wanted this was to test the costume. Could it handle intense fight? Like, could it handle intense fight? Boom. See how the jacket sort of whooshes out there? Boom, goes out with the thing. It moves, it's swinging around, it's moving. Here, you're seeing it swing out, stuff like that, just little ones. This was our original axe test. So, you know, you guys have seen the movie, so you know what it actually ends up looking like. But again, this was all early test stuff. And we would, let me see, was there anything else? No, that's it. So anyway, that is our show and tell for tonight. But yeah, so for those, you know, indie filmmakers, anyone who's just interested in how films are made, the real bones of Never Hike Alone were built in these early test sequences and starting with the costume. We built that costume, we got that all together. And once I had that costume, we went to camp and we played around. And we just kept playing around and doing all that stuff until we really started to get it right and we started to bring Kyle up. So what I want to suggest to everybody is on the Never Hike Alone channel, there is, or on the Womp Stomp Films channel, there is, where is it? There's our behind the scenes tab. If you go to the behind the scenes tab, there are multiple, let me see if I can get to it. Can I get to it? View playlist. You guys can't see what I can see, but there's something called Never Hike Alone, a Friday the 13th fan film, the main lodge test footage. There's early 2016 test footage. There's location scouting with the Never Hike Alone crew. And there's the trail station. There's a couple things that are on there. I would just suggest go back, look at the trail, no trespassing alternate scene, the behind the scenes 2016, the main lodge test footage and the early test footage. And that's going to give you more of an insight into the types of things that we did before we ever put the first real shots down on the actual movie. Doing all of that work, doing all the prep work helped us really create a functional space that we could get all of those cinematic things. You saw what we started with. You saw that we started with empty rooms that had nothing in them, and with a little bit of testing, you know, we want, like when you watch a character walk through that space in an empty space, you can sort of visualize different things in there. And how can we utilize these rooms? How are we inspired to sort of do these different things? Those are things we can go over on another podcast. Specifically, we can go through the different sets that we built and why we built them, when we built them, how we incorporated into the movie. Because a lot of the movie was built and then like shoehorned in between two other scenes. Still made sense, but that's why daylight takes so long in the movie, because we kept adding scenes towards sunset. So it's like the longest sunset ever. But yeah, so it's 10:47 right now here. I've been going for an hour 15. My last comment is this from Mardina: the white mask in the dark and the way Jason moved is what made him so scary to me growing up. Very exactly. So after that, if you want to ask a question, I'm going to take questions for maybe 5 minutes. While I'm waiting for questions to come in, once again, I'm going to remind you that we are crowdfunding Never Hike Alone on Kickstarter. Hang on. Boop. And then I'm going to do boop. Or can I do there we go. We're doing Never Hike Alone, not the anal cut, but the final cut. This is an earlier poster that we fixed, but we're doing the final cut. It is currently on Kickstarter. We are almost at $30,000. I haven't checked it lately. I know I have my Kickstarter around here somewhere. Let me see. Are we here? Oh no, we're at 29. We had 324 backers, $29,884. We're almost at $30,000, which I believe takes us to 60% at that point, if my math is correct. Maybe not. Because right now we're at 50% funded. If we hit 30,000, we're going to be at 60% funded with 34 days to go. And that is going to be great. So if you haven't done it yet today, definitely go make your pledge. If you have made your pledge, think about adding some stuff. And if you have not done it yet, please share a link to the campaign. It is in the description of this video. Please share it to your family and friends who enjoy Friday the 13th. Just put it out on social media for us once or twice in the next week. It can go a long way if everybody in the chat does it. I would be super appreciative of that. Oh, okay. We got 11 comments coming in. Boing, boing, boing. Let's get to that. Let's go like this. Boo, boo, boo. Okay. Where's Mardina? I just saw her. Okay. Why the F mark on the mask? Because in the original concept work, so let's kind of do this. In the original concept work, it was this. This was the right here. There was just something about that I thought was interesting. F for Friday. And I just liked that mark. You know what I mean? So I said, let's come up with something. And, out of that came this. So it was sort of the same idea, just used a little bit differently. So that's a great question there. People agreeing with each other. I'm not going to put that up. I backed all your projects. Can't wait for the final cut to arrive. Thank you, Rick. I really appreciate that. Alley Girl thinks this is the best stream. I appreciate that as well. Question from Mitch the Ripper. Can you tell us about the different experiences in playing Jason and Michael? I've gone over this a little bit, but I can do this really quickly. Eric, I'm going to add beanies next week. I'm going to continue my Michael Myers and Happy Halloween. I will get to that in a second. Where does Never, I'm going to come back to you, Mitch, just because that is a question. I can get some of these quickly. So where my question is, where does Never Hike Alone, Ghost in the Fog take place? Never Hike Alone, Ghost in the Fog takes place in between Never Hike in the Snow and Disappear. So it happens before Never Hike in the Snow. I would say if Disappear is 2004, Ghost in the Fog could be anywhere between 2008 and 2012. It's a very sort of any time goes type situation. It's past part 8, but obviously once we get to the events of Never Hike in the Snow, everything from there is just the Never Hike Alone verse, and that's really what pushes it forward. There is a period between 2004 and 2017. That entire span, there are lots of stories like Ghost in the Fog where people wander into the forest and don't come out, and this is our tip of the iceberg of how we want to explore these different sequences, the different people going in, all that stuff. Would you consider doing a Halloween movie, and would you bring back any of the stars from the franchise like Danielle Harris? Yes, I would totally do that. And we've made 3. We did the Spirit of Haddonfield. We did the face of Michael Myers, and I did Happy Halloween, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Just not F for Freddy. Yeah, definitely not F for Freddy. Please talk to Deb Voorhees about releasing 13 Fanboy on Blu-ray. I agree. I think that's got to happen. Yes, Rick, that would be awesome for a making of a part 2. What did Rick say? Oh yeah, I wish they would make part 2. Do we need a flowchart map or anything? No, you don't need a flowchart map. It's just sort of, maybe one day we will. We'll do a timeline. We'll really lay it out. Okay, so that's that. Didn't want to give spoilers. No, Jason is not a Deadite. He's a Revenant, which is much different. What's the most scariest 10 seconds of the Friday the 13th series that scared the crap out of you as a kid? Mine is Sackhead Jason running towards Jenny in the shack. You mean Ginny, Ginnie, but either way. Let me see. Oh man, what really scared me? I mean, the whole sequence, the beginning sequence of part 6, like him coming out of the grave and the lightning and the face, and he didn't have the mask on yet. That really scared me. Him being at the bottom of the lake really scared me. Him attacking Rob underneath the stairs was very sudden. I remember that scared me a lot. Him popping up when Ginny says, "There's someone else in this room." He pops up when he pops up from the bed. That was another one. When Jason sticks his hand through the window on Ginny when she's trying to reach for the window, that really got me. I know, Jacob, but we're not counting that. Great. So let me go back to Mitch's question because he has a very good question that I wanted to talk about. So he asked me about the difference between playing Michael and playing Jason. So with Jason is coming from a place of, let me get back to doing some of this. Jason is a place of rage and emotion and sort of, there's a lot going on with the costume. You're wearing the mask, you got the hood on, you got the hands, this jacket, I got padding. I'm sort of like, you got to sort of really kind of focus on your movement because there's a lot of movement, but you got to sort of get it simple. So I'd like to keep Jason on a straight line. I like to keep Michael on a straight line too, but like any type of side to side movement in your characters, like you can kind of have like a little bit of a roll, like if you're walking, but if you're doing this, which I feel like Freddy versus Jason, this is Jason, ding dong, kind of dunking along. Like here, like this feels like you're like a Mortal Kombat character ready to fight. You know what I mean? Like, but you're still all within yourself. You're in a straight, stiff, strong line. You can kind of move there. And there's a lot of moving parts. There's things moving. Like Jason's coming through, and you're kind of like, and he's kind of imposing. You sort of have to put your head out in the mask. So when you're wearing it, if you're back here, it looks a little weird. So when you have the cowl on, I like to extend my head out and get my shoulders back. And then that way, now I'm carrying the mask forward, putting the mask in front of everything. And now I'm kind of working from that position. Emotionally in my head, I'm thinking, there's my victim. I have to kill him. I'm going to do everything I can to murder them. And just go for it and just make myself feel big and imposing like a predator of the forest and kind of run from there. With Michael, where I was, Jason is so much going on and I'm all these things I got to do. It's really tough to see through the mask, all that stuff. Michael is a lot easier to play, meaning that you put on the jumpsuit, the mechanic suit, you put on the white mask, and you're in the costume. I darken my eyes a little bit so you can't see any of the white skin reflection. I put some dirt on my hands, some dirt makeup on my hands, so it's not a clean, perfect hands, like some crusty nails, some stuff like that. But it's a costume that's very easy to get in and get out of. It's very easy to feel comfortable in it. Like you can wear whatever you want underneath. For Happy Halloween specifically, it was cold out. So I actually had like warm clothes underneath and I would just sit and get bundled up and I'd put the mask on to have the heat on and I'd put a little hood on and I'd be fine. When it came to actually playing the character with Michael, I always tried to go with less is more. He is a void of emotion. He is a void of being human. He is just in a vacuum. He is just sort of there to inflict pain, and there's not much else going on. So like there's a very key scene in the movie where, you know, we've seen Jason get shot. I mean, not Jason, we've seen Michael get shot in Halloween 2018. They use that clip at the beginning of the movie to say like, this is where we're picking up in time. It's just shortly after he's been shot. And Michael, you see him take the fire poker out of a campfire, put it into a wound, close the wound, and keep going. And the way that I always describe this is that Michael's not so much supernatural, but he's detached. And he's closing this wound because he knows that it's slowing him down. So if he just cauterizes it and stops the bleeding, well, now his body will cover and he keeps moving forward. But he doesn't feel the pain. He's completely removed of it. He's completely, removed from reason and logic and morality and all of these things. And he doesn't have anything to say. He doesn't have anything to prove. He doesn't have like a rage. I don't think that there's like anger rising in him. I just think that it's a desire to kill. And like, I'm just going to systematically, like almost not a robot, but he's sort of like, there's my victim. I kill them and do it. And he does it with, he's not in a rush. He's not trying to, make the world record of like the fastest kills. He's sort of just taking each kill one at a time as it comes, assessing his victim and then destroying them. And I think in Halloween, in Happy Halloween, I think Cortland and Jimmy did a great job of setting me up with different scenarios where you got to see different, functions of the way that Michael moves. And, I don't know if for anyone who hasn't seen the movie yet, like I rip a kid in half at the beginning of the movie, murder people at a house party, smash someone's face on a gravestone, and just wreak all sorts of havoc all over the place. But there's just sort of like this, there's no rush to it. There's no real big chase. You know what I mean? Like even when there's a chase, he's not coming after you. Like in Ghost Jason, like he picks up, like you saw, like I pick up my pace. I start moving forward. I almost run, but I don't run because I don't feel like he can anymore. So it's really, in that standpoint, it's, Michael's just fun because it's like, you don't have to do much. Like you have to, again, like straight up and down, no side to side movement, but pick your lane and go. And the movement is so simplified. There's nothing flared about Michael. Like his arms barely move. They do swing a little bit, but like you got to be like, well, there's a happy-go-lucky hand swing, and then there's just sort of like my body's in movement and I'm coming after you. Slow and steady. That type of movement. And so there's just something that's sort of Michael's, I guess, frequency. It's sort of his tempo, and Jason's tempo is, he moves quicker. Like there's more purpose. There's more shoulder turn. There's more kind of coming in here, coming forward. Like you see him moving through the forest in those shots where he's chasing after Kyle down the path, down the trail. It's kind of all there. So I hope that answered your question. Let me see. The scene where Jason crushes the guy's face in the shower, you can see the big dark fingernails, just gets me going every time. So scary. Yep, I agree. I think I need to revisit Happy Halloween. I've seen some terrible Halloween fan films, and I think Happy Halloween was one of the few that I like. Happy Halloween is definitely, I would say, the most bang for your buck. You're getting a bunch of kills out of it. Undead reminding everybody to support the Kickstarter. Face of Michael Myers is more of a cerebral thing. No one's killed in the movie, but the costume looks really good. I got the mask off of Justin Mabry, who's one of the best. He designed the Halloween 2018 mask for Chris Nelson and his team. He does some of the best original he's one of the owners of Trick or Treat Studios. He does a lot of the mask designs, but he gifted me this mask that's like really good. In fact, it's right over there. I should grab it. We can talk. I'll wear Michael next week. So I really like the look of Michael in that one. And I think there's some acting that I do in that is pretty cool. And then the first one I did was Spirit of Haddonfield with Renee Rivas. That was sort of that one was fun. I mean, it's got different things that are really nice about it. You end up recreating the closet scene. There's a little bit of a bait and switch with some stuff. And it's interesting, but I think what people really, really want to watch is Happy Halloween if you're going to watch anything. And again, if you go to the Womps, you're on the Wompstomp Films page right now. If you scroll down to fan films, Happy Halloween, all of those films are in there. So you can watch them all tonight. I mean, they're all short. I mean, Spear Haddonfield, I think is like 15 minutes. Face of Michael Myers is like 6 minutes. Happy Halloween's another 20 minutes. But that, I mean, Cortland did a great job on it. There's some really cool effects. There's some really cool, I mean, there's some really great trickery in there. So I definitely say check that out. The Killer of Camp Blood has a great question. He called his own question great. Let's see. How did Jason get his mom's head and sweater from his old shack one cabin in Habits? That's a great question. I'm going to say that at the end of part 2 and at the beginning of part 3, where they replay part 2 and you see Jason sort of pulling himself away, in my head, in some place in time, Jason took the sweater, he took the head, and he hid it. He hid it away. He knew that he was compromised. So those things were hidden, and wherever he hid them, he found them again when he came back from Manhattan. So I think part of the Never Hike Alone lore, part of the prequel work that we want to do, if we ever get a chance to make more entries to this franchise, is that we will go and we will look at him rediscovering this stuff upon his return to camp. When he's back out there and able to move around and able to do these things, I think it's time to sort of like go see where he hid it. And I think he hid the head and the jacket or the head and the sweater in the camp, because the camp was still desolate and not being used. And so I just got to think of like a good place where it could be hidden. So we're going from there. Probably digging his mother's grave. No, just because her head has always been separate from her. Let's see. Who designed the mask in 13 Fanboy? I can't remember. I actually don't remember who designed it. I wasn't really involved with the design of that mask. And I can't remember the studio that did it. I feel bad. I'm sure if you go back and you look at the credits of 13 Fanboy, you find it. Oh, somebody asked me about playing 13 Fanboy. 13 Fanboy was really just like an aggressive me. So I thought about myself, like I'm an athlete. I know I'm going to run around. I'm going to be really fast. I'm going to use my speed to my advantage. So a lot of that was just really just sort of being tough and just sort of, it was very fighter mentality. You know, I trained Muay Thai. I need to get back into it. So I was really just using sort of fight stances and imposing stances, and mostly just trying to design kills with Deb that were imposing and fun and just intense. And so that's really what I try to bring with it. Yeah, I got shot 3 times, but hey, I've seen people survive worse. Crystal, he went to their Lost and Found. Let me see if there's anything else. All right, so we've been going for an hour and a half tonight. You guys are still hanging with me. I love it. Thank you so much. Thank you, Undead, again for that big donation tonight. That's really great. Lupe coming in with $5. Thank you so much. Can't listen to you talk all day. We love you, Vincent. Jason forever. That's right. Jason never dies because of fans like you. Thank you for supporting the channel tonight. Thank you for supporting the Kickstarter. Remember, if you can take that link and you can share it out this week, that would be a huge help to me. I've been so busy that I honestly, I've been sharing it, but I think a little bit of help, a little bit of sharing would go a long way. Jim asked, do I have the mask with the chevrons from Never Hiking the Snow? No. So there's a lot of mask collectors out there, and you know, to make money from the films, you know, to not make money from the films, but to make money for the films, to get like more money into the shipping and doing other things. Like I've had to sell the masks, like different of the masks over the years, but I like giving them the collectors. You know, it helps me raise big money for the movies. It helps me do big scenes. I don't currently own any of the original masks. They're all to different either backers, or we do have some people. The original mask is with someone who he works with museums a lot to send Friday the 13th props to those museums. So he has taken, he has the mask now. So when they do pop up different museum bids, they're going to use the mask from Never Hike Alone, hopefully, in some of those displays. So that would be great. So yes, I'm signing off for the night. I'm going to go get some rest. Shout out to my softball team, who we won the championship tonight. We were down 1 game. We was the best 2 out of 3. We won on Wednesday. We pulled it out tonight. So shout out to the Scrappers down at Father Kelly Woodbat Softball League, adult softball. Yes, still going at it. Congratulations to everybody for the game tonight. That's one of the reasons why we started late. But thank you for sticking around. I hope I answered your questions about, where Jason came from, what my thinking was, Ghost Jason came from, and how I got to those conclusions. If you ever have any questions, ask it on a future stream. Write me an email at wompstompfilms@gmail.com. If you're not already, follow us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, follow us on X, follow us on TikTok, and especially follow us here on YouTube at Womp Stomp Films. Check out the Kickstarter, share the link, get your backing. Check out for maybe beanies next week, maybe some other fun stuff. I wanted to get a new pin design soon as well. So we'll get definitely some there. So everybody, you have a wonderful evening. And until next time, I will